Early this May, Colleen and I got to paddle one of the upper stretches of the Freeman River, our local favorite river. And it was the first time down this year. And as we traveled down, we noticed that a lot of logs and debris was piling up. And that's a characteristic of this river. And as we came down this particular stretch, we saw ahead of us a lot of logs and thought we'd best pull over and head to shore for a closer look. And this is what we discovered. So quite an immense log pile that was strewn completely across the river. And in fact, upon a closer look, we realized that the river had carved a brand new path through the forest, as you see in the video now. So now the river's going right through there. And before, the river used to go to the left where I'm pointing now. That's where the river went previously, down that way. And it's no longer going that way. It's now decided to cut through the forest here, and it left a massive pile of logs, as you can see here, in slow motion so that the camera is a little less jittery. And the entire volume of the river is now going underneath that wood, which is an extreme hazard. You definitely do not want to be swept into it. So we had to plan for how to deal with this, and of course we had to portage around the log jam. Now, crossing the river to the other side where we can do an easy portage should not be undertaken immediately above a log jam such as this. So we're now figuring out how we're going to get across, and we decided it would be best to drag our canoe a little bit further upstream, put some distance between us and the log jam, just to be sure that if we had difficulty crossing the river, which at this point it's not that difficult to cross, but even then we wanted to be sure that we could get across with plenty of time before getting to that log jam. So now we're just simply going to ferry across using the front ferry and angling our canoe to the other shore with a little bit of a tilt to the left and some forward strokes. Took us across the river into this little slack water pool on the other side. And then we had to figure out the best place to get up the bank and pull our canoe out so we could portage around. Now the river had just come down from flooding. Previous to this, the water was up above the grassy bank that you see there. So it's quite muddy and slippery. And we had to, pick a nice place to get out and then haul our canoe up the side of the bank. It looked really good for as far as dragging the canoe through the forest here goes. It wasn't all that thick. The forest floor was even relatively mossy and soft, so we just were able to pull the canoe rather than unloading our gear and making multiple trips around the log jam. We just thought we'd drag it through the forest. And here Colleen is heading across the forest, or through the forest, looking for a good route for me to then drag the canoe up over a few logs. And as you can see, it's quite open. That's why we chose this side of the river to portage around the log jam. And just picking our way through here nicely. The water was up this high, running through the forest where I'm standing right now, and it's since come down. So here's a look halfway down the log jam, and it's in slow motion again to avoid a lot of camera jiggle. And the entire volume of the river is now passing underneath all of these logs. Definitely not a place you want to be caught in or having your canoe swept into. Very, very, very dangerous. There would be virtually no escape as if you were washed into this log jam. And keep in mind the river is pushing quite fast. What you're seeing is slow motion, and the current was more than adequate to push you underneath the logs. So now we have to find a way to get to the end and back onto the river to resume our trip. A little bit of push, pull, and drag to get the boat to the other side. And you can see where the river cut through the forest. There's a little bit of erosion here on the side and trees toppling over into the riverbank. So this was all forest previous to this flood, and now it's, as you can see, a new path for the river with a lot of debris. We've seen log jams like this that will stay in this state of a giant mess for as much as a year or two, and then suddenly they'll get cleared through at the next major water event, or simply the river will decide to go around it and leave this pile where it was. So here's our exit point from the forest. The easiest way down this little bank was right here through these little trees. And out across to the newly formed rock bar. Here's another look at the logjam from the low side now. On the right is a bunch of saplings that are now part of the river. They're still holding on with their roots, and above that is all of these spruce trees that were mowed down and piled in a great heaping mess. And now it's time to just hop back in and resume our trip down the river. The Freeman River always has a lot of dynamic movement on it and log jams, and it changes the course and the direction and the path of the river constantly. To get a good view of this, you can check out some of our other videos. We have other videos on the Freeman River that show many other log jams and other potential hazards, and some of the incredible beauty that we encounter along this river. Log jams such as this usually decorate the river for a few hundred meters downstream of the actual log jam, with many trees to avoid as well.